Welcome. We're going to talk about part 3, influencing leadership, accommodating inputs, and rolling out the plan. Welcome to the final part. So we have so far covered what? We have covered the CEO-CFO partnership and integrating planning. And we also talked about how to navigate this impasse. Now let's talk about the end game. How do you influence the leadership team to buy into the plan? How do you accommodate the inputs in meaningful ways? And how do you roll out the final plan so the entire organization, they commit to executing it? So here's what I've observed. Even when the CEO and the CFO, they are perfectly aligned and have built a great plan on paper, it can still fail at rollout if the leadership team does not buy in. You need the functional leaders to be advocates for the plan, or they become just what they are, compliant executors. You need the broader organization to understand and embrace the plan, not see it as something that is imposed from above. Hence, the CEO and the CFO, they need to work together strategically on influence, on how to accommodate the inputs, and how to roll out the plan. So let me show you how. First, let's talk about influence strategies for the leadership team. Remember, different leaders have different personalities and they respond to different types of influence. The CEO and the CFO, they need to understand their team and they need to tailor their approach. Some leaders are influenced by data and logic, the way you end up approaching them. Here's a market opportunity. Here's a competitive landscape. Here's what the financial model shows is possible. So let's look at the data together. And some leaders are influenced by strategic vision. Here is where we are going. Here's what we are trying to achieve. Here's where we are trying to go as a company. Here's a future we are building toward. Here's why this growth is essential for getting there. The vision. And some leaders are influenced by peer dynamics. Every other function is committed to their part of the plan. Your team is critical to making this work. We need you as part of the leadership team pulling together. Yet there are some leaders that are influenced by resources and support. I know this is a stretch, but here's the investment we are planning or we are going to make to support you. Here's a prioritization. I'm giving you initiatives, some funding, and you won't be alone in this. This is my commitment to you. So the CEO and the CFO should explicitly discuss how to handle each leader. For each functional leader, what motivates them? What are their concerns? What influence approach will be the most effective? Let me give you an example. The head of product, he was resisting the aggressive roadmap targets that were set forth for him. The CFO tried to influence through data, showed him the competitive analysis, the market opportunity, the financial impact. It didn't work. The CEO tried a different approach, strategic vision. He sat down with the product and said, I need you to understand what we are building here. We have a chance to define this category. 5 years from now, this company could be the category leader that everyone else benchmarks against. But that only happens if we move fast and build ahead of the market. I cannot do this without you. I need your leadership and I need your commitment. Now, what do you think happened? That got through to the product guy. He didn't care about the financial model, but he cared about building something great and being part of defining a category, of being part of tomorrow. And once he connected to that vision, he committed fully to the plan. The CEO and the CFO, they need to know their team well enough to use the right influence approach with each person. Second thing we're going to talk about, and we'll talk about how to accommodate inputs and to do so meaningfully. Now, throughout the planning process, the functional leaders will raise a lot of concerns. They'll suggest alternatives. They'll push back on assumptions. And the CEO and the CFO, they need to demonstrate that they are genuinely listening and accommodating input where it makes sense. Here's what a meaningful accommodation would look like. You adjust a plan based on legitimate concerns. Let's say if sales raises a valid point that Q1 hiring is too aggressive, given the recruiting capacity, well, you phase the hiring more evenly across the year. You show sales, we heard your concern, and we adjusted the plan accordingly. You make specific commitments in response to requests. If the marketing asks for earlier investment in new channels to allow some time for testing and optimization, you approve a Q1 pilot budget specifically for this purpose. What happens then? You basically tell the marketing, we're supporting you with resources to de-risk the plan. Third element, you create new mechanisms to address concerns. If product is worried about getting pulled into too many different directions by competing priorities, you establish a formal prioritization framework. And you invite him to be part of monthly reviews. You show product, we have created a structure to help you manage the competing demands. What did you do immediately? You acknowledged that you cannot accommodate everything, but you explain why. The customer success comes at your door and says, we need to hire 10 people, but you can only approve 6 given the cash constraints. You explain the constraint clearly. You don't hide that. But you ask them to prioritize what roles are most critical at this point. The key is that functional leaders need to see their input actually affecting the plan. If they raise 10 concerns and you don't adjust anything, they will feel like the planning process was theater. If they raise 10 concerns and you meaningfully adjust 6 of them, well, they will be your support at that point. They'll feel heard, they'll feel respected. I've observed that CEO and CFO should track every significant input from functional leaders and explicitly address each one in the final planning review. I've observed that works the best because here is what we heard from each of you. Here is what we changed in the plan in response. Here is what we couldn't accommodate your request and why. It is that dialogue that will be encouraged between the highest level of leadership and the functional. This demonstrates that the process was genuinely collaborative and it was not a consultative theater or a banter. Third, let's talk about the sequencing of building buy-in. You cannot influence everyone at once. The CEO and the CFO need to strategically think about sequencing. Who do you bring along first? Who do you bring along later? What do you think? So, okay, here's the sequencing I recommend. First, you go to your core believers. Get them aligned. Every leadership team has 1 to 2 people who tend to be positive, who buy into strategic vision easily, who trust the CEO. Get them on board first. They become advocates because they help influence others. The second part now, go and address your skeptics. Pull them in one-on-one sessions in a private room. Don't try to win over skeptics in group settings. Meet with them privately, work through scenarios together, find a version of the plan that they can support, and once you're on board, they won't undermine the plan in group settings. So now the third piece is that you bring the entire leadership, the full leadership team together for the final alignment. What have you done so far? You have done the pre-work with all the individuals, or some of the individuals before you bring everyone together. The believers are already supportive, that's great. The skeptics have had their concerns addressed. Now you're building collective and commitment. I've observed that planning sessions where the CEO tries to build buy-in with everyone at once in a big meeting, and the skeptics have already poisoned the conversation for everyone else, it's a much harder path to win. It's much better to do the hard work of influence one-on-one before the group session. Fourth, let's talk about the final leadership alignment session. And this is the meeting with the CEO and the CFO. They bring the entire leadership team together to finalize and commit to the plan. This session should be carefully orchestrated. And here's the agenda that I recommend. The first 30 minutes, the CEO presents a strategic context. Why are we doing this plan? What does success mean and what does it enable? What happens if we don't achieve it? So now you connect the plan to strategy and vision. The next 30 minutes, the CFO presents a plan and the financial model. What are we committing to? What resources are we investing? How have we addressed the concerns that were raised? What are the key assumptions in this financial model? Now we move on to the next 30 minutes where you're discussing the final concerns. You open the floor for any remaining questions or concerns. Address them as CEO, CFO team. Make final adjustments if needed. In the following 30 minutes, create an explicit or commitment process. And what that means is go around the table. Each functional leader, they state their commitment. Maybe they write it down. If anyone hesitates, address it before moving forward. You get everyone's commitment. Then the next 15 minutes, you plan out the rollout. How will we cascade this plan to the broader organization? What is the communication strategy? Who is saying what to whom? And by the end of this session, you should have explicit commitment from every leader, a clear plan for organizational rollout. And fifth, let's talk about rolling out the plan to the broader organization. The plan is not real until the people who get impacted or who actually do the work, they understand it and they commit to it. The CEO and the CFO, they need to choreograph this rollout very carefully. Here's a rollout sequence that works. Day 1, you get a board approval. You present the plan to the board, you get approval, and you get their support. The board's blessing gives the plan credibility. Then in day 2 to day 3, the leadership team, they communicate to their directs, and each functional leader presents the plan to their direct reports or their version of the plan and explains what it means for their function and what is expected of them. Then you go to week 1 where the all hands presentation is going to happen and the CEO presents a plan to the entire company. Focus on why this plan matters, what success looks like, and how everyone contributes to the success of this company. Make it inspiring and not just informative and data driven. And then in week 2, you get into departmental level planning. Each department translates the annual plan into quarterly objectives and individual goals. This makes a plan tangible, personal, and executable. In week 3 and 4, you're setting up individual goals, and these are tied to the plan. Every person in the company has goals that connect to this plan. Everyone understands how their work contributes to the overall advancement of the plan and the corporate interest. The CEO leads the strategic communication, the vision, and the why. The CFO provides the financial context and the operational details, the what and the how. And the functional leaders, they cascade to their organization the specific implications for each team. And when this rollout is done well, it creates a certain high level, certain degree of energy, some people coming together, an alignment. People understand where the company is going and feel part of something ambitious and great. And when it's done poorly, the plan feels like a burden imposed from above. 6, let's talk about the first 90 days after plan rollout. The plan only matters if it drives execution. The CEO and the CFO, they need to create the momentum in the first quarter. And here's what an effective 90-day execution plan would look like. The weekly CEO and the CFO, they check in. They review the progress against the plan. They identify the early warning signs. They address the obstacles quickly. And in those monthly executive reviews, the full leadership team now reviews the performance against the plan. Now they celebrate what is working, but they course correct what is not. And then you're down to the quarterly all hands updates. And the CEO reports to the company on the progress. Transparency is building. They're building trust and they're building accountability. Continuous communication should be reinforced. The plan should be referenced constantly in decisions, in prioritization and resource allocation. Does this align with the plan is the penultimate question. The CEO is the repeater. He constantly repeats, reinforcing the strategic priorities and celebrating progress as you make progress toward those priorities. The CFO is a chief tracker. He maintains visibility into performance and flags when things are going off course. So let me give you the final example of how all this comes together. I worked with a CEO-CFO pair who executed this playbook beautifully. They spent 10 weeks building the plan collaboratively with their leadership team. They dealt with impasses through creative problem solving. They accommodated those meaningful inputs that came from the field. They got explicit commitment from every leader on account of that. And at rollout, the CEO gave an inspiring all-hands presentation about where the company was going. The CFO explained how the plan was achievable and what it required from everyone. Within 30 days, every employee had individual goals tied to the plan. And what was the result? What was the result? The company hit 95% of the plan in the first year, not because the plan was easy, but because the entire organization was genuinely committed to it. They were fired up by it. The CEO-CFO partnership created that commitment through thoughtful planning, an empathetic understanding of the challenges, genuine collaboration, and an effective rollout. So let me close this series with the key principles of CEO-CFO partnership in planning. 1. Align early and often. The CEO and the CFO should be united before engaging the broader team. 2. Diagnose before solving. When you hit impasse, understand the root causes before proposing solutions. 3. Create options through creativity. You are rarely stuck with binary choices if you think creatively about alternatives. 4. Influence thoughtfully if you can. Different leaders need different influence approaches. Tailor your strategy to each person. 5. Accommodate, but accommodate meaningfully. Show that inputs are genuinely affecting the plan. People need to feel heard. Give them respect and respond accordingly. 6. Orchestrate the rollout carefully. That's important. The plan only works if the organization understands and commits to it. Choreograph the communication. 7. Then drive execution relentlessly. The plan is just the beginning. It's simply a plan. But the CEO-CFO partnership needs to drive accountability for execution every single week. So when you get this partnership right, planning becomes a very powerful tool for alignment, a powerful tool for growth, and a very powerful tool for value creation. But when the partnership is weak, the best planning methods will fail. I thank you for spending these 3 episodes with me on the CEO CFO partnership in planning. And combined with the top-down and the bottom-up planning series, you now should have a complete framework for leading planning processes that balance ambition with realism. It balances strategy with operations. And most importantly, it balances aspiration with commitment. This is the most important work that a CEO and CFO do together. Get it right, and you set your company up for breakthrough performance. Get it wrong, and even the most talented team will struggle, and they will struggle to execute. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.